So good morning. My name is Andrea Watson, and I'm Tualatin Valley Water District's Communications Supervisor. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon to our third virtual event for customers. And this one is going to feature emergency preparedness and how you can prepare for service interruptions in the future. Hopefully there won't be any, but we want to make sure customers get this information so they can do their part in helping us with emergency preparedness. I do need to let the participants know that these calls are recorded and they are placed on YouTube at the conclusion of the event. And we make those available for people to review or maybe who aren't able to attend for some reason. We're going to have a couple speakers today. We're going to start out with Tom Hickman, the CEO, and then he'll hand it over to Robert Witham, who's our Emergency Program Coordinator. Just a few housekeeping things, which people are getting this technology mastered. If you are on a computer or a tablet or other mobile device and you would like to ask a question, you can type it in the chat box. At the end of the presentation, we will open it up to question and answer. And we ask that you raise your hand so we can call on you, or if you are on a phone, we will open it up periodically and let those on the phone have a chance to speak. Otherwise, we ask that participants mute their microphones through the presentation just to make it so that everyone can hear. We can mute you, but we can't unmute you. So, you know, if you do try to speak and you're unable to do so, that may be the reason, and we'll try to catch up with you just as soon as we can. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce Tom Hickman, a professional engineer. He joined Tualatin Valley Water District as our Chief Executive Officer on August 1st of 2019. He enjoys adventures, and he has some terrifying emergency experiences from his service in the U.S. Navy, where he fought an onboard fire in his 20s. Tom enjoys rock climbing, extreme mountain biking, and wilderness camping. And the past 12 months have served up some conditions to test our water utility emergency preparedness muscles. Tom has just the perfect blend of education, experience, people skills, and personality to lead TVWD through today's challenges. Please meet CEO Tom Hickman.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it and appreciate the kind words and introduction. I'm still getting used to the idea of extreme mountain biking, but but I know by many standards it might meet that. Okay, let's get right into this. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Justin, are you advancing slides? There we go. All right. So, you know, today we're talking about emergency preparedness, and of course we all think of the big ones, you know, but we want to remind all of our customers that there are also other types of service interruptions that can be significant. So we can have pipe breaks that result just from time and fatigue of the pipe material. We try to do our best to get ahead of those, but they do happen. And they certainly can result in outages to customers. We try to keep those to a very short duration. And then we also have planned outages for maintenance and repair, and we try to give advance notice for those. And also try to limit the duration, but those can still have an impact on you, whether you're at home or you have a business. And then there's, of course, fire events that we saw recently, and those can actually, depending upon where they are, they can impact our water supply sources. So in the most recent fires we had, we had a fire near Hag Lake, which didn't result in any reduction there, but easily could have. It did result in a power outage there that did cause us to change our operations there in terms of the supply. But for us, our bigger supply right now is from Bull Run and the Portland Water Bureau, and of course the Bull Run watershed was threatened during the most recent fires. and we were facing a potential cutback from Portland Water Bureau. So that could have potentially had a significant service interruption. Fortunately, it didn't. But those are just some of the things. Other events that can do this. Wind storms can actually cause service outages when trees get toppled, and root structures can actually take out water lines when those topple. Uh, Ice storms or deep freeze events certainly can have impacts to people where we can have frozen lines. And frankly, the problem isn't when the line freezes, it's when it thaws. So having spent a number of years in Central Oregon and seen a lot of those kinds of damages to homes and property, that can happen and certainly can cause an outage. And then, of course, the bigger ones, power outages. We do rely on pump stations to move water around. Contamination events, potentially, but we do try to address those through our treatment. And then the one, of course, the biggest one here is earthquake. And earthquake can be a significant disruption because it runs the risk of actually having a number of water line breaks. Next slide, please. Seems to be a delay here between, there we go. All right. What we're going to talk about today is two things. In large picture here is what's the district do to prepare for resiliency in these events, and then what can you do as a homeowner or business owner, because it takes both. And in fact, we're kind of seeing this even in the COVID event, right? We each individually have to take precautions, as well as larger organizations have to take precautions to protect workforces and those kinds of things. So this is similar, that we both have responsibility here. So some of the things that we've done to prepare for resiliency is we've developed regional interconnectivity. So meaning we have the ability to get supply from multiple places in the event of an outage. We have, it should say multiple process water treatment. A little typo there, sorry about that. But we have various treatment to address potential contamination events. And then we have lots of backup systems. In fact, you can see there in the picture on the lower left-hand corner, that is a pump station that we can basically truck out to a location to connect to areas and be able to get something back up and running in the event we lost a major pump station or even a major line where we need to feed to another area. And then we have multiple water sources. We have automated controls that allow us to operate a lot of the system remotely. And then we have cooperative agreements with many partner agencies in the region and even throughout the state to share resources. And then, as I pointed out, the emergency water distribution trailers, disaster drills, training exercises, these are all things we do here. And then, of course, what we're doing right now is customer education and preparedness. So hoping to help our customers all be prepared and respond in this event so we can try to make these disruptions as painless as possible. Next slide. So a little bit about our system. So we have 13 pump stations throughout our entire service area, 23 reservoirs, 150 sampling stations where we sample for water quality purposes, and over 752 miles of pipe. And in terms of our storage, we have about 67 million gallons of storage capacity. While that may sound like a large number, not all of that is emergency supply. That there's daily fluctuations in that. And as you can see at the top, we can have a peak day that is easily 39 million gallons. And, you know, if you look, if all of our reservoirs are full, you know, we got a little over a 2-day backup supply there in our reservoirs. So this is why we got to be prepared for potential water outages in the event that we were to have a really significant event that limited those reservoir supplies. We serve a population of approximately 217,000 people, and annually we provide about 7.8 billion gallons of water to our customers. Next slide. So one of those things that you may have heard about that we're doing to address resiliency and redundancy is we are investing right now in what's called the Willamette Water Supply Project. And this is a large project. We are partnering with Hillsborough and the city of Beaverton on this project, and this project is going to be another supply that allows us to feed our area, and what makes this supply very different than what we have from the Joint Water Commission through Hagg Lake or from the Portland Water Bureau. What makes this one very different is that this whole project is being designed from a seismic perspective. So in other words, it's being designed to withstand a large seismic event. And so this will be the supply that should we have a very significant, or when we have a significant Cascadia event, we will be able to utilize this supply to make sure that we can continue to provide everybody with water through that event. So these are the things that we are doing as a district. But at this point, what I'd like to do is turn this over to Robert Whittam. He is our emergency program coordinator for the district, and he's going to talk to you about some of the things that you can do at home. Robert served in the Navy, and he engaged in missions including providing tsunami relief support to the Indian Ocean region in 2005. And that was after a 9.1 magnitude earthquake hit the region in late 2004, which was followed by 100-foot tsunami waves. Robert was also involved in disaster response to New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, where he supported the mission of restoring critical infrastructure and protecting the supply chain of the non-governmental agencies like Red Cross and the Salvation Army. Robert earned a master's degree in emergency management from Arizona State University and active in regional and national emergency management efforts. So with that, I'll turn this over to Robert.
All right, thank you, Tom, so much for the introduction. And I just want to say, first of all, it's really encouraging to see how many people have shown interest in this presentation. It was quickly filled up, and we hope to get more of this type of information out and more presentation out to the public. So this is great turnout. Thank you so much, everyone. So I want to first start out with something that Tom hit on, and that is that while the district is working on a lot of efforts to prepare for emergencies and major regional disasters, one of those key parts is you. preparing yourself and your home and your businesses for any type of main breaks or say like a regional disaster like the Cascadia event is going to be key. We only have to look to some of the planning and information that's been passed along for something like Cascadia to see that it is going to take a long time to restore some of the services that would be in our normal lives, and that includes water systems. Having that supply of water and the ability to provide yourself water is going to be essential. A couple of things to consider and to keep in the back of your mind is that during a disaster, the disaster always starts local, and with that, the responders, including police, fire, utility workers, and any other type of responders or planners, are also going to be affected by the disaster. So there's going to be some delay and some disruptions during a major regional disaster like that. Even when the responders start to turn and be able to provide services, a couple things that need to be considered is we might have to take that precious resource of water and focus on, say, firefighting efforts, or getting our hospitals back into water to serve for getting people medical services. So there's a lot of other places that the water might have to go at first before we can provide that to homes or businesses. Justin, next slide, please. So I'm a big fan of simplifying guidelines and rules, and it's a great way to keep that information in your mind during a disaster, because during that time it can be hard to keep a step-by-step process and guide of how to handle a disaster. So one loose guideline that I like to go off of, and a lot of preparedness and survival individuals do, is the rule of threes. It's a great way to understand why water is so important to us. You can start with looking at this, that you can survive about 3 minutes without air, and that's give or take, and that's a maximum, or in icy water for about 3 minutes. You survive about 3 hours in a harsh environment without shelter, and then if you look there, you can survive about 3 days, 3 days without water. Now, this is going to could be shortened or extended due to some circumstances. During a disaster, something to consider is that your effort, your physical exertion effort might go up just trying to respond to it, or you might find yourself having to lay low. But this is a good guideline to understand that it's about 3 days before you have dire consequences of not having water. Next slide, please. So as you see here, like I said, I'm a big fan of acronyms and rules. Another acronym that I like for water preparedness is the acronym SIT, S-I-T, with water. The first action to start with is to store water for your home and for other places that you might be. A good rule for storing that would be a gallon a day for each family member for 2 weeks. And that gallon is the minimum that most preparedness experts say is recommended, and that's going to be for drinking, hygiene, and cooking requirements. The reason that we're asking for 2 weeks stored is, like I mentioned before, there's going to be that disruption of essential services. So 2 weeks is about what they believe it will take to restore getting water back to individuals. The next part of that is isolating. That's the I for SIT, and that's isolates the water that you have that you know is still usable during a disaster. So say if an earthquake, it starts off and it starts shaking. Something to consider is to shut off the main valve to your home, isolate that from the public water system, which might get contaminated or might just not work, and then you have that safe drinking water within your home with your pipes and your hot water tank if you have one. The next part of that is the T, and that's treat. And depending on what's going on, the disaster at hand, going back to the earthquake, there might be some water that's available, whether it be inside your home or outside your home, but it could be suspect of contamination. So it is best to have some type of way to treat that for consumption. We'll discuss that later. Next slide, Justin. I think I'm having a little delay. There we go. So like it was mentioned, a great place to start with emergency preparedness is with water. It's a relatively simple process to start with, and it gets you going on preparing yourself for emergencies or disasters. So like I mentioned before, there's a recommendation of a gallon, something for each day for a person, so that can get up to a good amount of water. And that could be increased due to whether it be medical needs or could be including pets as well. It's best to plan for everybody in the home, including pets. Next slide, please. So while the next slide is loading, we have a little bit of delay. I'm noticing there's many examples and many ways to store water within the home. A good place to start if you haven't done it before or don't know where to start is to look at different types of examples of water storage that are commercially available. If you see here in the photos, there's a wide array of different storage that are available commercially that are designed for water storage. You have your large 55-gallon drums, which a lot of folks, if they have the storage, will go towards. Something to consider for that, if you do get 55-gallon drums, is that it can take up some good amount of space, and you do need a couple things to store it securely, and also make sure that you can access that water at a later time. And that would be a pump, and it shows there in that photo. There's a pump that you put inside the barrel that you can pump out water, and then also water treatment drops, and that red thing is what's called a bung wrench, which closes up the water once you've put it in there. So something to consider with that, though, is that if you do get something like a 55-gallon drum or something larger like that, that doesn't mean that you should take that and consider it as a one and done. It can be something that can happen is that the place that you store your water could get damaged itself, or you could not be able to get to it. So it's best to look at other areas that you can place your supply of water. So in the middle photo there, and then also in and on the right, there's some smaller containers that you can look into that are commercially available that are 7 gallons, 3.5 gallons, and you can distribute that water and squirrel it away and hide it away in different areas inside your home. That's a great way to make sure that your sole source of water does not get destroyed. Your sole source of emergency water doesn't get destroyed during an emergency. Justin, to the next slide, please. So while we're waiting for the next slide, there are, of course, like I said, commercially available source containers, but that doesn't mean that that's what you need to do. You can certainly purchase water in bottles and containers. You can reuse 2-liter bottles and also other containers. Something to avoid though is to I'd stay away from glass. It is possible, and some people do that, but it's heavy and it's fragile. It can break. So other things to containers to avoid would be something that's held milk or juice. It's tough to get those those remnants out of those type of containers, and it propagates bacterial growth even with treatment. So it's just not they're not good environments to store water. So down on the bottom you'll see a photo of someone who's used and capitalized on some unused space in their home, and they put water underneath their bed. Great place to start. A great place to keep some of your water is putting a couple gallons, maybe a pallet of water bottles, or something that you filled up yourself, or one of the smaller commercial containers. So a couple things to consider for that is that there's going to be some things that you're not going to want to drink that could still be good for sanitation purposes and possibly hygiene, but I'll go through a little bit of those. Anything out of your toilet bowl, and I would say even your tank, you should probably avoid. Any type of anything from any type of radiators that you might have in your home, avoid. And water beds, because of the treatment sources, it would not be good for drinking. And that would also include your pools or hot tubs. The good sources maybe for sanitation purposes or repurposing for other water uses, but not for drinking. Absolutely stay away from water that is any type of flood water, and avoid water that might have floating materials in it, or especially as some type of odor to it, or any type of color that isn't the color of water. Also, if you think that the water is contaminated, if it has a fuel smell, or if you think that it could be been contaminated with any type of metals or toxic chemicals, I would avoid it. So for storage tips, a couple things to consider when it comes to water storage is that you need to clean and sanitize those storage containers before use. Try to keep them out of course, keep them out of direct sunlight in a cool, dry place. Like I mentioned before, don't store it all in one place. Try to keep it distributed as best as possible. I understand that space could be limited, but do your best. And when possible, if you have larger containers, or you have could have a hard time moving the water, consider that water is actually pretty heavy. A gallon of water is about 8.34 pounds, and so if you get something like a 55-gallon drum, or even anything like that, if you fill it up, it's there. It's staying right where it's at. Also, because it's so heavy, be careful stacking water containers that aren't designed to be load bearing, or stackable containers. They can crush each other if you get too high. And then regularly check your supply for any type of signs of wear or contamination, and make sure that it's rotated at the recommended timeline. Just the next slide. So a few other sources to consider that are within your home for water is you might have an ice maker, ice cubes, placing frozen water inside a deep freeze is also a good idea if you have the space. You can access water from, say, fruit juices or other types of drinks that you might not consider pure water, but have water inside of them. Something to avoid and stay away from is caffeinated drinks or alcohol that would actually do the opposite and dehydrate. So there's also, you likely have canned foods that would be packaged in water, and even some of the foods that aren't packaged in water, but say like your syrups and whatnot, would be an alternative source in an emergency. Next slide. Some outdoor sources for water that are often utilized on by some is rainwater. Collecting rainwater and placing it in a barrel. You see there on the photo on the right that it's that you can collect rainwater and have that in a barrel for use. Some people do that for their gardening or for their outdoor use. And you could also look at any type of moving streams or bodies of water around you. Or other types of natural springs. The water from these types of outside resources, they should be treated before consumption or use. On to the next slide, please. So other places that you might consider some water storage is look at your office space where you work, other places that you might spend some considerable time at. It's might be difficult to store the 2 weeks of water in an office space if you have a closed-in space or just not a lot of room. But it's not a bad idea to reach out to your supervisors or management and see if there's some type of alternative that they can maybe store water for the group or just a place to squirrel away for some water. Vehicles are a great place to store water to and from work or just traveling, and that might not just come in handy for emergency, but you might get stuck in traffic and need some water. So, but of course, replenish that if you do use that. It's best to keep that storage away from sunlight. Trunk is a great place to put that. It doesn't need to be, like a water brick like I'm showing in that photo. It could be some water bottles or a pallet of water bottles if you have the space, or underneath seats, place a couple water bottles. Anything is better than nothing. And on that note, also, there's plenty of people, especially in the Portland metro area, that travel and commute by bike or by other transportation. It's a good reminder to keep some water on you. Water is heavy, but you can get a water bottle or a pouch that goes inside of a backpack. But it's also not a bad idea to have some type of water treatment on hand, say like some tablets or a portable water filter, and that goes for the vehicle and office as well. Yeah. Next slide. So onto the isolating the I of the SITS acronym that I mentioned. So isolating after emergency, the first thing to look at is to make sure that your loved ones are safe. Do a check and make sure that everybody's safe first. And then the next thing is to consider shutting off that main supply to your home. That way, if there isn't, if you have water in your system, in your pipes, in your water heater, you can possibly save that from being contaminated. Next slide. So let's talk about the emergency water shutoff. This is a great thing to know and to plan on where this is located, not just even for, say, like your earthquakes or regional disasters or major disasters, but you could have a water leak, an unexpected water leak, and this valve is going to control what water is coming into your house from the public source. More than one person should know where this is located within your home or multi-family housing complexes. It's a good idea to exercise and ask other family members if they know where the emergency water shutoff is. Some places to look out for that are your crawl spaces in your basement where the water line comes into the home. Look into the side of the garage near the water heater or laundry hookup, or it could also be outside near the foundation. It could be protected by a clay ring or a clay pipe. One thing that this from personal experience, I moved into a new home a few years ago. I had a hard time finding out where my water shutoff was. Don't give up. Ask for guidance or professional help. You could even contact a plumber to have that assistance. But it is important. I finally found it in my walkout basement in a random place, but I did find it. Next slide. So the importance of isolating and shutting off that main source is that your water heater tank, if you have one, it could be a great source for emergency water. The photo here will help you identify what your water heater tank looks like if you have one, or if you have a tankless system. If you have a tankless system, you'll have to make other emergency planning arrangements, supplement your water other ways. But if you do have a tank, you can access that water through that tank. You can find that type of instruction and resources from our site, our website, and also the regional water provider site, which we'll provide in further emails, and also in the chat room or in the chat we'll put that. Something to consider and make sure if you plan on using this and accessing this type of water is keep it up to date and draining and keeping it going. The last thing you want to have is to drain it during an emergency, only to find that it has a bunch of muck and nastiness in it. And the best way to do that is to drain it on a yearly basis and just run it through that process. But definitely before you do any of that, it can be dangerous. It is a hot water heater. There is hot water, so please follow guidance. And if you feel uncomfortable, have a professional come out and show how and demonstrate how that would happen, how you could drain a hot water heater. Next slide, please. The next part is treating water. So if you're uncertain if the water source is safe to drink, there's a few ways, more than a few ways. I'm just going to hit very, very quickly on a few of them. Boiling is a great way to treat suspected water. A few things to consider if you are planning on boiling is understand that you could be taking away from emergency fuel source that you could use for cooking or for heat during an emergency. So plan accordingly to what type of fuel, emergency fuel that you would need. You would need to take that to a rolling boil, and it depends on elevation, but at least for over a minute for treating before using. And like I said, please refer to best practices and guidelines. Something to consider is that boiling can actually concentrate some contaminants like heavy metals or fuel, or even cyanotoxins or other harmful plumes. Another way to treat water is with bleach, and we'll provide information on the doses for that. But a few things to consider is that it shouldn't have any soap in it or any type of fragrance. It should be just normal plain Jane bleach. Look for the concentration levels. That's going to identify how much you need in the mixture. Another thing to also know is that it does lose potency over time, so that does need to be rotated out. The next thing that you can use is purification tablets or iodine. Those follow the instructions that are on the packaging. You can find those at outdoor stores, online, a lot of places you can find those. Something to consider and look at the packaging is that for iodine or iodinated water, it's best to avoid that if you are pregnant or have any type of thyroid problems, but that check for and talk to your healthcare physicians for that if you plan on using iodine. The next option to consider is water filters. We have one here on the photos. There's so many that you can choose from, commercially available. You can do your own DIY. They really vary in size and portability. They vary in the amount of water that they can push through and treat and how they can treat it. Next slide, Justin. So the next slide, while we're waiting for it, shows some of the options that are commercially available that could be used for not only in the home but also on the go. You have an example up top of being able to pour untreated water into a bag. It runs through a line filter, and then the water drips into a bag that you can use clean. You have some that you can attach to a water bottle or other types of water sources and do, say, like a force push through that you can drink it like a straw, which that's another option too. Is at the bottom you see an individual that's drinking straight from the source out of what's called a life straw. A few things to consider with options like this is that they are somewhat limited in the amount of water that can go through. I know that some people with, like, say, the life straw, they find it pretty difficult to actually use. So best to maybe practice that or go through and see the capabilities. Something that I like to use for home prep, and also something that I have in my one of my go kits is a few buckets from Home Depot that you can stack on top of each other, or any other type of big box store, stack on top of each other and put in between a ceramic filter, and it drips slowly, and then there's a spigot at the bottom that you can use for the clean water. It's a great DIY. It's relatively cheap to purchase those parts, and you can put it together yourself and have it prepped and ready to go. So before I finish up and turn it over, Justin, to the next slide. Something else to consider for preparedness is as we start to get to cold water or cold weather, you need to prepare your water system for that. A great place to go is to check out the Game of Season video. You'll see here a little photo of it that we put together. It's about a minute long. It's a type of a parody off of Game of Thrones. So I'd go check that out on our website. Practice and exercise. Don't just prepare all the options here and not use it. It's best to exercise all this and make sure that you get all the kinks out beforehand, before disaster. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea and Justin.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you, Robert, for the presentations. And we do have a number of questions queued up in the chat. So I'd like to kick this off by saying you can type your question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. We also are aware that a number of you weren't able to see the slides during the presentation. The most likely cause of that is Microsoft Teams doesn't play equally well with all of the web browsers out there today. That may be the reason, but we will get those out to you in a follow-up email and put them on our website so you can review them there. And the first question out is came in quite early, and that is from Paul, and he wanted to know, do you separate emergency response into continuity and restoration, and would you do both simultaneously in an event? Do you want to take that one, Robert or Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. No, so that's a great question, Paul. Yes, that's as a major factor in emergency management. Continuity of operations is a huge part of that, and also business continuity. You know, we have a huge amount of things that we need to prepare for, and then all hazards type style. So you are planning both at the same time, and during an event you would do both. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and a second question. This came in from several of our participants today. June and Jazit want to know about storing water and how long is it safe to store it, particularly like the bottled water that you purchase at a store.
Sure, I can talk a bit about that in a high level. That's one of those things that it does depend on how you store or what type of storage container you use. And also where you store it. So if you store it in a cool, dry place, it's on the conservative side, but I would check if you have smaller, say you're doing water bottles or other type of water that's commercially available, I'd crack one open every 6 months and just check it out, see where it stands. And also with any of your commercial storage containers that you might have filled up water yourself. There are some that would say longer, but I'm a big believer on the conservative side. If you distribute it outright, cracking open one of the bottles or cracking open your containers, it's not that big of an effort, and it won't cost you much to replace if you're using your own containers and have to fill up with your water from your home.
Okay, another question from Ed. He wanted to know if he missed a topic on sanitation and how we handle that.
Yeah, great question, Ed. So on the sanitation side for emergency sanitation, I want to give awareness to an awesome plan that and project that's been put out by the Regional Disaster Preparedness Office, RDPO. It's called the 2-bucket system. So what the 2-bucket system is it's a toilet plan where you separate your liquids and your solids. You use the 2 5-gallon buckets that you can purchase from any big box store, and you can actually get a guidebook from the Regional Disaster Preparedness, rdpo.net, and we'll put that in the chat again, like we mentioned. And there's a whole guidebook on how to wash your hands and to separate that, and they have stickers that they'll provide, and also guidelines on how to get that emergency sanitation poo and pee buckets information to you. Thank you, Ed.
We also have a question in from June, and she would like to know, would distilled water be a better choice for long-term storage, and how long would that last related to a non-distilled option?
I'll once again, I'll go high level. I would look into this a little bit deeper through other sources, but distilled is absolutely a great option. You can remove a lot of the contaminants from an untreated source. But yes, it's absolutely a wonderful and viable option. getting down into the technicalities of if it's better and longer for storage, we'd have to get back to you on that. But it is absolutely a great and viable option for treating water and getting it ready for storage.
So we also have a question from PM. He or she would like to know, how secure is the control system from cyber threats? And is there redundancy in our system? We have a lot of experts on the call, so I'm not sure if maybe Tom or Pete or Joel want to take that on.
Well, here's I would say we definitely have redundancy there, and it's something that we look at. Cybersecurity is something that we are constantly monitoring, watching, and dealing with, and we have a lot of systems in place to prevent that from happening, but we also do have redundancy in the system. As far as the details of the redundancy, I would certainly allow Pete or Carrie or any one of our folks that are directly involved in those to respond to that.
Yeah, sure. This is Pete Boone. I'm the Water Operations Division Manager, and I oversee the group that maintains and operates our SCADA control system. So as Tom said, so yes, we do have cybersecurity at the front of our minds all the time. We keep our network isolated from the other networks, from the business network, and certainly from the internet. So intrusion into that system is very difficult. We also have layers of physical security to keep folks, bad actors, from tampering with that and getting access to it. And the way that our control system is designed, yes, we have redundancy. We can operate our control system remotely. So if we were to lose one of our facilities, we could transition over to alternate locations. And so got a couple different layers there, and we're pretty confident in our ability to defend against those threats. But like Tom said, we are always watching for those types of things and advancements in threats and keeping things up to date.
Thanks, Pete. Shauna also has a question in the chat. What is the best way to prepare the water containers before filling them for storage?
Yeah, so we're going to provide some more information on that, but just quickly, what you can do is a bleach solution where you would mix a bit of bleach with some water and take that, put it inside the barrel and slosh it around. Make sure you hit all the sides of it, and then drain it. Get that solution out and then let it sit for an air dry afterwards. And then make sure you don't contaminate it with any of you or anything else, and pour your water in directly from there. Like I said, we'll get more down into the exactly what type of solution and mixtures in the information that we provide, but that's a quick overview.
Yeah, and the follow-up emails that we'll send you, there'll be instructions, and there's actually how-to videos that show you step-by-step how to prepare the containers. Make sure you don't cross-contaminate as you're filling those, and then how to get the air out of it so that you keep contaminants from entering into the container. Toby also has a question. How do we isolate house water from external source?
I'll hit that again. We mentioned that a great way would be to use that main water shut off, to isolate from any type of external source. Locate where that's at within your home, and practice shutting it off. It's not usually that difficult to turn it off, but that would be a great place to isolate your home from the rest of the water source.
Vincent asking, can I fill my water storage tank using water from the outside water hose? I feel like we're just leaning on Robert really heavily. Maybe Joel Carey, do you want to answer this one?
Hi. Yep, absolutely. Joel Carey, Water Resource Division Manager. I oversee the water quality program. The general rule of thumb to that is no, do not use an outside hose for filling a water storage container unless that hose was something that you kept separate for a potable source only. The reason being, most outside hoses, while it's generally, as long as it's just clean in general, that's okay, but they can harbor bacteria inside of them. No matter what you do, anytime you then take water and store it at that point for a long period of time, you're introducing potential for contamination and regrowth. So don't use an outside hose.
We have a number of callers who called in on the phone and they don't have access to the chat. Is there anyone out there on the phones that has a question that wants to unmute your phone and ask a question? We'll give a little bit of time for them to do that. Okay, not hearing any. We also have ran through all the questions that were typed in the chat. So is there any other participant who would like to ask a question? If you want to raise your hand or unmute, we'll try to take those one at a time. Ken, would you like to ask a question?
It looks like there's another question regarding iodine tablets. Are they suitable? And maybe we could have Joel answer that question.
Sure. Is that the whole question?
Are iodine tablets suitable?
I'm assuming suitable for disinfection of water. Yeah, what we generally say about it is, if you're just talking about disinfecting water, yes, follow the manufacturer's specs. For storage of water, that's something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, just not knowing the specific product itself. So as Andrew pointed out, there is information we're going to share after this and links to resources about storage of water. Oftentimes, I just will generalize this and tell you that for the storage part of it, simply having very clean containers, following that process, and using a potable source of water will get you a high quality stored product for easily a year. So, but again, Andrea is going to share more information after this and links to resources.
So Ken, you also have a question. Will the presentation be available? And yes, we will post the slides on our website. We'll post a video of the session out on YouTube. You can expect to find those in the next 24 hours. And then we'll include a lot of links of where to find the videos on water storage, how to prep the containers. And then also just want to acknowledge that Pete Boone, he put some additional information in about the hose question. And that is that there are potable water hoses available. Mine's white. They tend not to be the green ones, but they're really designed for recreational vehicles and motorhomes. But you can procure one of those, and those are safe to use after you disinfect your hose bib. So there are solutions out there for that. And Ken, your hand is still raised, but you also typed in the chat. So if you have an additional question and you want to unmute, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I think we tackled it. And I don't see any other questions coming in. So if we want to just thank you again for your participation, and I don't know if Tom or Robert want to say a few words, but we really appreciate you taking time and interest in emergency prep.
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
I'll just say, I'll say a couple things just real quickly. This should be considered the beginning of a preparedness effort. I would absolutely look into other resources for the 2 weeks ready from Oregon Emergency Management. Look at the Washington County emergency management page for any type of resources. The Red Cross has some great resources. We are blessed in the Portland metro area to have a lot of experts and leaders in the field of emergency preparedness, and there's a lot of stuff out on government websites. So take a look and keep on learning.
I see that somebody's trying to ask a question by phone, and maybe they could unmute and ask their question. All we're hearing is buzzing. Yeah, well, maybe you could type the question in, and we might respond, or respond to you directly if you provide us some contact information. I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining this, and we have been doing monthly virtual presentations on different topics that we believe would be of interest to our customers. So please let us know if there's a particular topic that you would be interested in hearing or knowing more about, so we can look at possibly developing a virtual presentation around that. During these times of COVID, this makes it a pretty nice way to reach out and communicate with our customers on a number of topics. So I just want to thank everybody for participating, and certainly look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.